Something bizarre was recently found and few seem to know about it. This is Tony. Hope you're all doing well. We're going to get into a ton of stuff in this video, actually a lot of stuff. And of course, we're going to be talking all across the board about a number of things. We're going to talk about what's happened in Florida after, of course, Milton. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about something with regards to Disney. We're going to get into also this main story that kind of fits the first phrase that I said in this video. Something bizarre was recently found. And you won't believe what it is, my friends. Something that's going to happen within about a month or two. And I'm going to show you the paper. I'm going to show you the document, the GOV document that changed very recently. And what it says now. Yeah, you're going to like it. We'll get into that and actually a ton of other stuff. Let's just get into this. So we'll start here with Disney. So, of course, they recently had their prices go up again. And this just shows you sort of a hallmark of what's going on with inflation. While they tell you it's only 3% or 4%, in reality, it's much, much higher than that. If you use the old calculation, it's like 12% on a 3%. 3% today is like 12% in 1980. Okay? Now it's supposed to be 7% this month, which would probably be about 20% back in 1980. And we're seeing that with prices of things around us. Disney's prices just went up again. Disneyland, $200 for the cheapest ticket for one day now. And they're saying it could go up as high as $400 in the next few years. Can you even imagine that? Like, what? I mean, already the prices were insane. Now it's going to be even worse. Tourists who came for a Sunday Disney vacation are instead stranded by a storm. Of course, that was Hurricane Milton. And actually, there's a lot of damage with regards to that in certain areas. Here we have a clip from John Williams. This is John Williams here. Let me play this.
I've never before seen so much property damage in my life as what I'm witnessing right now in St. Pete Beach. This business completely destroyed. Behind me, I'm going to give you a full tour of the inside of this business.
Now, of course, this is sort of right in the area where it first landed in Florida. Obviously, there's going to be a lot of damage in that area. Of course, thankfully, it became a Category 1 very quickly. We all know about this at this point, but there's a lot of people going to have to rebuild with that. You also have what's going on with Helene. There's actually a lot of stories in that realm as well, which are kind of strange. And actually, one of them ties into the big story in this video. Okay, and I'll get into that in a little while, but it completely correlates perfectly, almost like something's up here, my friends. We'll get into that, like I said, as we get farther into it. You won't believe what it is either. Something that will be able to, something that our military will be able, of course, to do here that they weren't able to do before. We'll get into that, like I said, in a little while. Now, getting back to Disney, of course, they've lost about $1/3 billion on 2 Marvel movies. This is why they've stopped. And this is really good news, actually, believe it or not. They did have a really huge hit recently with Deadpool and Wolverine. But the fact is, now we're seeing Hollywood change. All those people that are against 45, that are for the rainbow, for the woke stuff, all those guys are losing work. And I've been covering this a lot. We're talking Robert De Niro. We're talking Whoopi Goldberg. Brie Larson, Amber Heard, all these people losing tons of work. Yeah, and I'm not going to really get into all of that here, but it's actually a very good sign of what we're going to be seeing in the future. You're going to be seeing normal movies again is what I'm trying to get at. So that's some good news, I guess you would say. But what's interesting, like I was saying about inflation, you have here this account on Twitter or X talking about how much inflation has spiked of recent after doing the rate lowering by the Fed of 50 basis points. We're reaching 7% with current modern day calculations, which of course you bring it back to 1980, that's about 20% inflation, which of course they're never going to tell you that. But that's really what it is if you actually go around and calculate it the old way, if you include everything in the calculation. We're seeing, of course, a lot of companies struggling of recent. AutoZone, because they have their customer base is not the type that has a lot of money. Obviously, there's a lot of people that are not able to afford a lot of things at this point. We even have McDonald's, of all companies, their largest French fry supplier, closing, shutting down completely. This shows you how bad it is. When you have the top fast food restaurant, I'm not saying it's the best. I'm just I wouldn't recommend their food, but the top fast food restaurant, their main supplier just going out of business altogether, shows you just how bad it is. If you have the top company. So you're seeing this all across the board. And we're seeing also, because of the fact there's a lot of companies not using commercial real estate anymore, this is what's going to cause a lot of the banking issues. Perhaps a number of banks going out of business very soon here, particularly when the stock market crashes, which we know is going to happen in the next couple months due to the yield curve uninverting. 1 billion square feet of new housing space emerged in cities as America's office market faces major crisis. So all these loans are basically worthless. These buildings being just straight up given back to the banks. And that's why a lot of these banks are going to be going out of business, some of these smaller ones. And like I said, we're going to get into this huge story in a little bit here. We're also going to be talking about what's going on in a number of cities. Similar, not exactly the same, but similar to Aurora. We'll get into that as well, and actually how that will tie into this big story as well. First, I got to mention food supply, 25-year shelf life. Link is in the description. 3 months worth for $6.97. This is the one with higher calorie counts. So it's a little bit more of a premium package for 3 months. Link is in the description. You might want to get this considering all the wonderful things going on around us. At any rate, of course, you also have gold and silver, knowing that the stock market is going to crash soon here based on the yield curve on inverting. Like what we saw in the Great Depression, it went up. Gold went up 61% during the Great Depression. So we know it's going to go up a lot. Gold and silver is going to go up a ton in value over the next few months due to the stock market soon. As soon as it crashes, you're going to see it spike up, and it already has been of recent. Actually, I was looking at my wife's 401k, and it actually went up less than gold did this year. So, I mean, that just give you an idea of where gold is and silver is right now. Usually, though, the stock market, the S&P 500 does way better than gold and silver, but currently, gold and silver is winning. So, at any rate, it's wise to get that, considering all the inflation going on around us. Link is in the description for that. Also, of course, you have my website, GR Videos. I got tons of videos over there. Link is in the description. A lot of my videos that are missing here, of course, on my channels. I also have a ton of deep dives over there and a lot of other things. Link is in the description. Stuff from 10 years ago predicting what we're seeing today. At any rate, go check that out. Let's get back to the video. So we have here iconic city with vibrant music scene is now the most dangerous place to live in America. Memphis, Tennessee, once known for its blues, soul, and rock and roll music, has now turned into a haven for crime. So this is kind of what's going on with a number of big cities of recent. We're not even talking about what we've been seeing in Aurora in this case. This isn't, I mean, there's probably a little bit of the, what I call not so legals, the ones that came in, of course, to our country, not, legally. They have some of that, but most of this is just simply what's going on with our society of recent. We've seen a lot of decay in these cities, and it seems to be across the board with certain cities, San Francisco, Chicago, New York, and they're not improving whatsoever. We're seeing Memphis turn into the worst city, apparently, to live in out of 182 cities. So we're seeing a lot of crime increases, although it's interesting. They put out these crime statistics. You remember recent saying it's less crime today than it was during 45's, tenure. In reality, what they did is all the precincts inside these really bad cities refused to report their data, and they only gave you the country data, countryside, rural areas, which of course are going to have far less crime. So they completely just, and this is what they do with everything. They do it with inflation. They do it with crime data. They do it with everything, jobs, just everything. That's the thing about the change, I would say, today when it comes to the economy and everything, is they just don't tell you what's actually going on. They try to hide it, actually. So we have here, of course, and like I said, we're going to get into the big story in a second here. This is kind of leading up into it anyways. New York City sanctuary status allows these, of course, gangs, just like we saw in Aurora. This is, of course, in New York City. So this is going to other cities. We're seeing it happening in real time all around us. And so this is only going to further exacerbate what's happening with these cities economically and in culturally, et cetera, et cetera. And I've also recently shown you guys this video that was on X in Germany, where you have thousands, I would say maybe even 10,000 people, what we call the not-so-legals, in their country, saying that they're demanding, and they're using speakerphones, and they're like chanting super loud that they want, of course, a caliphate. And we're talking a Western, of course, country, right? So it already shows you how when they bring in so many of these not-so-legals, it changes your country. It's not the same anymore. And I'm guessing it's probably not very easily to reverse either if you wait too long. That is why we need to get, of course, 45 in, because I'm hoping he actually does what he says, which I think he will. I think he's very, very serious about this. I think he's learned from his mistakes. I would say he made a couple mistakes at the end of his tenure last time. And, he kind of hurried some stuff through. He kind of took advice from bad people. I think he needs to just stick to his own, have really good advisors around him that are actually on his team, not rats, you know what I mean? And stick with a really good plan and just go through with the whole thing, right? So, of course, we've seen also recently, apparently she, call her Cammie, is not doing too well with the African-American male in our country. And let me just show you this. This is kind of interesting. I'm going to play a clip here really quick.
Better than him, but at the same time, I felt that it was incredibly disrespectful because he's making the assumption that we're not educated enough.
He's referring to this particular former prez, telling you must choose her because you're, of course, an African American. That's what you're supposed to do. And apparently it's not working out too well for him, because it looks like I'm starting to wonder if it's going to be 50-50 now. I mean, that's how much ground we've gained, particularly with this demographic in our country. It's kind of amazing to see such a turnaround. So, of course, she's getting pretty desperate. Now she's thinking about actually going on Joe Rogan, which I don't know if that will work out for her. I'm betting no, but maybe she'll have something right here, somebody helping her out a little bit. I don't know. Even with that, I still don't think she'll do well, because he usually asks some interesting questions, and she doesn't do well with questions. She doesn't do well with questions, especially if it's a 2-hour podcast, and even if they get a sample of his questions, they're probably not going to get them all. So there's going to be something that's going to throw her off. I'm sure there is. And of course, apparently it looks like there's already been a 7% swing over to him based on the latest data. So that's kind of interesting. This is all positive news, but I'm going to get into some of the not so positive news now. Now, recently, our current prez, off from the beach, no longer getting a suntan, apparently. Now that it's cold, he can't do that anymore. He's saying here, the same guy, this is actually the words right here on the screen that he says. He's referring to 45. He's talking about 45. He says here, the same guy who has 3 other major cases waiting for him, and he loses. And by the way, 34, of course, felonies. And so far, he got the sentence, kicked back, right? So he's waiting with bated breath for this to go through. But what's interesting is I actually went and watched the court case recently, the New York Appellate Court. That was on September 26. Here it is right here. And of course, the outlets, the media is saying like, look, they grilled both sides. But actually, that doesn't seem like what I see here when I looked at it and watched the actual video here and watched it with my own 2 eyes instead of just reading someone else's opinion about it. It seemed like they're very much not interested in what the prosecution had to say. It seems like they're thinking this is a ridiculous case, an absolutely ridiculous case. This particular judge right here is asking her for any sort of case like this ever in existence, because there never was one. There never was a court case like this. This is clearly something biased. It's not some normal court case. And that was what he was implying with his question. It was very obvious. He goes in here. He says here, can you identify any previous case which the Attorney General sued under Executive Law 6312 to upset a private business transaction that was between equally sophisticated partners, where the supposed victim had the ability and legal obligation to discover the allegedly misrepresented matters by conducting its own due diligence, where the supposed wrongdoer, it actually makes sense when you think about it, advised the supposed victim through written disclaimers. In other words, these people are not naive. They've been doing business for a very long time. They're hardened in this area. They know exactly what they're doing. They're not going to be, oh, you tricked me, right? It's just ridiculous. That's why there's never been a court case like this. Now, getting into the big story. Oh, this is interesting, my friends. Apparently something has now been added, a little clause to a D document. Oh, this is kind of interesting. The military now allowed to do something they couldn't do before. Right here, as you can see on the screen. Take, of course, out, your fellow American on our, of course, soil. This is something that may have been added in. I'm not saying I know 100% that's the case, but it does read like that. It very much reads like that. I mean, if I just took it at face value, that's literally what it says. But I guess I'm not an expert in this area. I don't know. I'm not, some sort of lawyer. My background's mechanical engineer, not lawyer, being a lawyer, or an attorney. So I don't, I'm just reading it with my own two eyes, and the way it reads is not good. It's probably the understatement of the year. Here it is. It's this paragraph right here. Paragraph, 3.1 here. It added an extra clause that was not there back in 2019. Recently added the clause. Let me see. Let me go find out when it was updated. It was updated very recently. Let me see here. I can show you. And this is on the D's website, .gov. Okay. And we're talking about this document right here. This is, I think, the old version. Yeah, it's effective 2016, not 2019. And the new version, which is effective at the end of last month. Well, this is kind of weird. Why would they update it all of a sudden very recently? On September 27th, and they did add one clause that was not there before. Let me show you this. Actually, let me show you it on the actual document so you know for a fact that it literally is it. Yeah, let me show you this. So here we are on the updated one, right? I type in lethal, of course, force. Notice that. Oh, look, that's the new one that was added in. The thing I just showed you a second ago. Paragraph, 3.1, exact duplicate of what it was saying. Here it has it down here. Assistance in responding with assets, with potential of this right here, or any situation is reasonably foreseeable that providing requested assistance may involve the use of course, force that is likely to result in this type of force, where someone could be, of course, a goner. And this has to do with helping out police. So we're talking about military being able to assist, of course, police with this type of situation, right? That was just recently added in a little over 2 weeks ago. Perfect timing. That's just kind of weird timing there. I don't know what to think about that. Oh, it's just so strange. Might have something to do with the end of this year. Oh, you don't like what happened? So there's that. That's kind of the main story. It's kind of big. Just like, I don't plan on going anywhere to March or anything. I'm going to stay right here in this room, okay? That's where I'm going to stay, okay? I don't want that happening to me. So, at any rate, that's my thoughts on that. Something you might want to take in your mind. I think actually though, I think there's going to be a little bit of an upset here. I think, of course, 45 is probably going to win. I'm guessing he will. And I don't think they're anticipating it. I think they're thinking they're going to win. And I think they're going to lose. And they're going to be very surprised by it. And then I don't know if they have a plan for that. Do they got a plan for that? Well, I guess we'll find out. They probably do. I'm sure they do. I wonder what it will be. But at any rate, so of course I got some other stuff I wanted to show you guys. I wanted to show you a funny clip of Bill Maher. He had on Dr. Phil. And I thought this was pretty hilarious because Bill Maher couldn't take it. All right, check this out. This is pretty funny.
Yeah.
You got to.
Is there a Democratic Party? Is there? Yes, I'd love to.
You should talk to John Fetterman.
Is there a Democratic Party? Or has it been hijacked by the...
Look at his face, man. He's like so offended by the question. If there was no truth to it, I don't think you would get offended there, Bill Maher. Look at his face. It looks like, what?
The extreme left. Is there still a Democratic Party? Because let me tell you,
it's the exact same thing, and it's not even...
He just tries to dismiss it. It's so funny, dude. Yeah, do you even have a party anymore? That's a good question. I don't know. It's kind of a strange... It's changed a little bit. It's not exactly what it used to be. All right. So, of course, getting on to some other stuff, we have, of course, the economies of the world. You have Germany's economy not doing too swell of recent. Germany's economy goes from bad to worse. And, of course, I noticed a little bit of a trend. We had, let's just look at this, the top GDPs of the world. You got the United States, which, by the way, is doing terrible economically right now. And it looks like they're going to, I mean, according to the yield curve, on inverting, it means we're going to have a stock market crash anytime now. You got China. They just had a stock market crash in Hong Kong like 3 days ago. Japan, they had a stock market crash a month and a half ago. In Germany, economy is doing terrible. This isn't looking good for the world economy. This is looking really bad. I'm thinking this is going to be like, potentially Great Depression level. I don't know. We'll see what happens. And what do they do to turn those things around? World WAR. But of course, this time around, it's not like World War II. Not really. It's a little bit different this time around. We have some interesting technology now that would just not make it turn out too well. Right? So, I mean, they even had it at the tail end of that as well. But axis of Ezekiel 38. Apparently all the countries that are aligned in, of course, Revelation are aligning now. Not exactly what I would call a good sign. So you have that going on. But I wanted to get into some other stuff a little bit. I mean, you just have to laugh at what's going on with the world. I mean, honestly, you have to be serious too. But I mean, you can't get too serious to where it makes you worry and all that stuff. You just got to kind of laugh at it, because if you get too serious, you're not gonna be doing well. All right. So that's kind of my approach to it. The fact is, we've seen this world. It's been basically a dumpster fire for some years now. Our culture has not been much better. I saw this interesting video over on Ruslan's channel. He's interviewing this lady who recently wrote a book. What is this book called? She's basically talking about sort of where our society has went. Here's the book. I can show you the book real quick. I can plug it for the fight, of course, for female reclaiming our divine identity. And of course, the thing is, though, you've seen kind of how things have been. A lot of promotion of women, power, sort of the whole femi thing has been running amok for quite a while now. And what's interesting is she pointed out in this interview that there's this phrase that a lot of people are using of recent called, here's the phrase right here, the future is female. And she tells the origin of this phrase. It comes from this bookstore called Libris Books from the 1970s. However, a lot of people are not aware. Apparently, they were, according to her own words here, they were casting, a spell, literal spell, when they did this. They actually were talking about some goddesses. They were actually worshiping, some goddesses and actually casting some sort of spell when they did this. This wasn't just like, hey, let's make a cool phrase and see if people will take it up. This was something much more than that. And of course, you've seen it over our society. And I believe this was actually initially started when the devil got out of the bottomless, of course, pit. I believe he got out, and this is my opinion based on my research, around 1440 AD, around the time of Joan of Arc. I had a dream where that's basically what God told me. In the dream, he gave me a number of little clues in the dream, and I did a bunch of research after my dream, and I figured this all out. Pointed out like 5 different clues, and it led to Joan of Arc and her friend Gilda. And Joan of Arc, of course, was the first female warrior. That was what I believe his plan was. He got out of the pit and he's like, how am I going to change things? Let's make the female warrior, right? And this was the first archetype, her, all right? And that led into all that we see today. That led into the scientific revolution and all these other things, all right? So you have a period of drastic change in scientific thought, all these kind of things. And this is what led into atheism and all these other things. You know, they called it the Enlightenment, the Age of Enlightenment, kind of like in the Garden of Eden. Like, ye shall become gods. You're enlightened. You know everything now. And actually, we don't know anything hardly. We have phones telling us what to know, and it isn't true half the time. We don't really know much of anything, actually, from what I can tell. And, of course, now we're seeing things change. I believe we're seeing God correcting this. This is why you're seeing all these things falling of recent. I don't know if you've noticed this. You have the whole thing with P. Diddy, and I think that's going to snag a ton of people because it's not the same as the guy with the island. This time around, there's tapes everywhere from what I understand. He sold them. He was like selling them and giving them out. This isn't the same thing as the other guy. The other guy was very strict in controlling all that stuff. This guy, he's like, oh, just, you want that tape? Okay, here you go. There's a lot of tapes floating around. So I don't think they're going to be getting out of this one. I think there's a number of guys that are getting, a lot of people are going to get caught up in it. And there's actually prophets saying that. Then you have, of course, atheism's fall. Atheism has fallen to the wayside. Richard Dawkins calls himself a cultural believer now. Literally. This is what he calls himself. You have atheists dropping their names left and right. You have ministers dropping left and right. I think God is basically cleaning house, kind of like what it says right here on the screen. Hollywood is now cleaning house. Chris Gore claims Marvel has cleaned house by removing wokey producers following Phase 4's failure, Star Wars Outpost, and of course Agatha all along. All of these, and I told you guys, there's tons of these actors and actresses now losing work. Brie Larson and this lady, Tatiana, were both cut out of Deadpool and Wolverine, and it became a huge success. That tells the producers, don't put these people in these movies. They even tried to cut Robert De Niro out of all the Joker scenes, which they couldn't do. They cut him out of a lot of them, but not all of them. And so there's like a ton of this going on now. So we're seeing these things going forward. And I believe it is a fulfillment of something I've talked about numerous times, where we have this 7 mountain, of course, prophecy, which says this stuff would all happen. And we're now seeing it come to pass. All right. And it says that all sectors of society will essentially have their leadership, changed. Education, business, Hollywood, even religion. That's why we're seeing a number of pastors of recent falling as well. I know I've talked about that numerous times. Now, getting over to this also, I wanted to mention BlackRock. I thought it was really interesting. So check this out. So they're still going forward with a lot of the stuff. They even put a trans, what is this? Trooper. Now, apparently they're doing that even. They're thinking that they can go ahead with this stuff, but as I mentioned, they're continuing to lose money while they do it. And there's actually now a lot of people being cut out because they're doing it. We have BlackRock. And interesting about BlackRock, notice the name, BlackRock. Notice it's a black rock on their logo even. As you can see right here, it's a square rock. And it reminded me of something else that has a black stone and is a cube. Right? You even have the Xbox, right? Which has a cube as well. But you have the Kaaba, if you've ever heard of this, which is in, I'm sure you've seen this before, the Kaaba. It's on this square block, and they all travel around it, right? I'm sure you've seen that before. Is that in Saudi Arabia? And what's interesting is if you look at the religion behind this, the history, they say it fell from heaven. And this relates to another religion, which we see in Scripture, where it talks about great is the god Diana. They say the same phrase too, because the phrase they say is great is their god in their language, Arabic. But they also did this in the times like 2,000 years ago, those that worship Diana. And Diana is Artemis. I've talked about Artemis before. I believe that's who they're actually worshiping. It's the same God who also had a rock come down from heaven, the exact same thing. So I actually think it's correlated. And what's interesting about this, we're going to see some things happening in the near future. I think we're going to be seeing God turning, of course, things around. There's supposed to be someone very, I guess you would say, for lack of a better word, anointed, that's going to be arriving on the scene soon. They're going to be calling, he's symbolically called the American, Pharaoh. That is what he's going to be called. And I'm not referring to 45 or anything like that. It's some different person. But there should be a person that will arrive on the scene very soon that's supposed to be leading, of course, America the right direction. I guess we'll see if that happens, because that's what a number of people have been, of course, predicting. But at any rate, that's my video. I'm kind of wondering what some of you guys think. Let me know in the comment section below, and thanks for watching.